Welcome to a new episode of TTG Conversations 5 Questions video series. I'm Karen Yu, Group Editor of TTG Asia Media. In this episode, we'll find out what appetite the long-haul market has for Asia. And this comes just in time for ITB that is happening in Berlin this week. Now, giving us insights on this topic is Lindsay, Head of Consumer Communications at Skyscanner. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I've got 5 questions for you, and here's the first. What are some of the critical factors shaping European and North American travel demand this year?
So we're seeing a really interesting trend with global travel as consumers are really turning their gaze to parts of the world as they reopen, and there's a real buzz around Asia right now. We're seeing that spotlight land on destinations like Japan, which have always been considered some of the world's greatest destinations, are actually now very much at the forefront of both consumer desire, media coverage. There's a huge amount of hype around going back to Thailand, to Japan. And so we're seeing that trend in the way in which European and North American travellers are searching. We also know that travellers, whilst there has been some discussion around the increased pressure from global economics, we are seeing that the cost of living, whilst that may impact discretionary spend for travellers, they are still planning to spend as much or if not more on travel, as the pandemic has really underscored for individuals the importance of travel in their well-being, in the way that they structure their lives. Having that couple of years where it was so difficult to travel as freely as we've previously been privileged to do so in many ways, we've seen that travel is remaining a priority for most travellers. And so I think what we'll actually see for the industry and for travel at large is that increased demand and increased understanding of value. And it's really important, I think, as an industry that we help travellers understand how to maximise their spend when they're travelling.
Mm-hmm. Great. And how are they booking so far this year? What are you seeing?
So we're seeing a real mix, actually. So during the pandemic, all of our kind of normal behaviours were thrown up in the air, and we saw either very short booking horizons or very long booking horizons, depending on whether people felt spontaneous and kind of waited until they knew they could travel, or those who really wanted something to look forward to. We're actually seeing that's really normalising now. And so you're seeing a much more typical booking behaviour. We're also seeing again, that kind of trip length piece is quite interesting. So we're seeing there's slightly more shorter trips than there were in 2019. But then we're also seeing some quite long trips where we're seeing that opportunity to work remotely and extend a trip be taken advantage of in many ways.
Do you think we're still in a period of not having a trend, because you spoke about how some bookings are still very short and some are still quite long, so it's still not quite what things were before, right?
Yeah, I think we're still finding as an industry a kind of way back to normalise travel behaviours. It's only really recently that we started to see almost all travel restrictions removed, and so from a consumer perspective, having that kind of full range of destinations back, and also the supply there and the pricing normalised, that hasn't quite happened yet. So that is obviously going to impact the way that travellers consider their travel. I think one of the things that we've seen at Skyscanner, for example, is that everywhere where you can search by all destinations ordered by price, that is actually something which has risen in the ranks of search terms this year for us, as we are seeing consumers prioritise price and be more flexible around destination choice. And so there's certainly ways that as an industry we can help support travellers to still get those travel plans in place that we know that they're eager to do, but do so in a way that we're providing them with the full range of options, given, as you say, Karen, there is that the trends and behaviours that we're used to are still coming back.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. Now, earlier you mentioned about Japan and Thailand being popular among the North Americans and the Europeans. Now, how does Asia as a destination fit into the travel plans? And are top favorites any different compared to pre-pandemic years?
That's a really great question, and it's a really good way of actually articulating how we are still just getting back to the kind of behaviours that we would have seen pre-pandemic. Because, for example, China was one of the most popular destinations in Asia for travel from this region. But as it's only just really starting to be accessible again for travellers, it hasn't quite yet made it into our most searched destinations. Um, that said, Thailand was a very, very popular destination pre-pandemic and is back once again in our top destinations in the region. So very, very much seeing that those behaviours start to go back to pre-pandemic norms. As I mentioned, Japan is now in the top destinations that we are seeing in the region, and that is definitely as a result of the reopening and the buzz about getting back to the country. So that's exciting to see too. And then India is again a huge destination for inbound and outbound travel actually. Domestically and internationally, and we are again seeing that both pre and post pandemic in our top destinations.
Mhm, mhm. What more can Asian destinations do to get more long-haul travelers coming their way?
It's a really great question. And it's an interesting one because we spent a lot of time at Skyscanner looking at the way that travellers think about travel post-pandemic, what matters to them most. And there's a really interesting point around being quite targeted in the way that we talk to travellers, because there are such different considerations for many travellers. So a really great example is a case where Skyscanner's team worked with Tourism Australia to target French travellers because the working holiday visa scheme was back up and running. And that was a way to really show an opportunity to a particular market. And they reached over 600,000 French travellers as a result of that. And so I think that there's something around as we've talked about, value is always going to be incredibly important in the current climate, and destinations who can showcase how easy it is to reach a destination and also to plan your trip whilst you're there. But then there is definitely something about being quite targeted in the types of trips that we know different types of travellers will be looking for. So as we see an increase in interest in wellness and active breaks, for example, how destinations can showcase the availability of facilities and landscapes that afford those sorts of trips. So I think targeting is something that we'll see more and more in terms of reaching travellers in the right way.
A lot of attention is now paid to the returning China market, and that's understandable. But are there emerging long-haul markets that Asian travel and tourism industry players should not overlook amid this China fever?
It's a really great question, and it's an interesting one because we have surveyed travellers across the globe throughout the pandemic period and beyond. And something that we have seen is that it's unanimous the desire to return to travel, to long haul travel, and to those once in a lifetime trips that are perhaps a bit longer, slightly more spend, but actually now in today's climate, travellers will be very much seeking value. A couple of markets which are interesting in terms of rising middle classes with disposable incomes who will be traveling more, the likes of India, Saudi Arabia. We're seeing increased searches in those markets. India is a particularly interesting one. I've just returned from India, and we spent a long time talking about some of the changing trends and behaviours with the Indian traveller themselves. So things like the rise of the solo female traveller. Going back to that point around targeting, there's a real opportunity for DMOs to be talking to travellers about access to different types of accommodation, different types of experiences. We know that solo travel is very mainstream now in global travel. It was perhaps considered slightly niche, pre-pandemic, and certainly I can remember going on trips myself alone and people saying, "Oh, you're going on your own," and actually now it's very normalized, and that again, it grows the opportunity for DMOs to think about how they talk to travellers. So huge opportunity for this year and next year. So an exciting time for the region.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura. That's all the questions I have for you. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thanks so much, Karen. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Past and future episodes of TTG Conversations 5 Questions can be found on the TTG YouTube channel. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye.